In this lesson, we're going to be drawing more of the secondary walls, and we're going to start to outline some of the important slab edges that we have, especially around the living area. So since the end of the last lesson, what I've done is I've made a couple of tiny little tweaks that I mentioned I was going to do at the end of the lesson, which are the grid numbering that has been done. We have A to G being numbered horizontally, and we have 1 to 7 being numbered in this dimension here. So what I've done is I've identified the main load-bearing points that are going to be existing between the two levels, and I've given them a number that can then be indexed by A1, A2, etc. I've also gone and filled in a few of the main load-bearing walls that I mentioned I was going to do. So I've stretched some of them out, copied a few more of them. So basically most of the major walls have been completed. Then I've also rotated the contours and the site outline ever so slightly, since it was a few millimeters below horizontal. So I just wanted to neaten that up by basically perfecting that rotation. Just looks a little bit nicer visually. So now we're ready in this lesson to add a few more of the walls, and as well I'm only going to do a few of them, and I'm going to do more of them off screen since there's no point in you watching me redo certain things. So I'm just going to show you how we do this section here, where we have a thicker load-bearing shear wall that's going to be in this direction, and it's going to have a secondary wall that is protruding out vertically. So first of all, what we can do for that main load-bearing wall is we can copy one of the existing walls. So always remember, you can easily make that a shorter process by just copying what already exists. Now what you want to do is you want to keep in mind that you have door openings on both sides. So you want to allow for sufficient space for that door, as well as space for people to be able to walk around. Now remember, if you use your minimum dimension of about 900 millimeters for that door, with that table being in front of it, it's going to create quite a narrow space to walk through. So because this is quite a large house, I'm going to allow for 1.2 meters for that door and a little bit of space as an offset away from this wall, just so that there is enough circulation space. So to do that, I'm going to press O enter, so to offset the line, and I'm going to type in 1200 millimeters, right click, and then just offset these two walls. And this will basically create temporary construction lines that I can now stretch this wall down to. So I'm just using S enter on the keyboard and stretching that wall down so that I get that position to be in the right place. So later on in a future lesson, we're going to draw in the furniture, and that is going to align up with this wall. And then we're going to create a door that has a bit of a side panel. We can even stretch that wall out longer if we want to. We'll see what we do. But the main thing is that that door now has sufficient space. So for this wall over here, we're not going to use a 300 wide wall. There's two things that you can do. You can either copy a wall which is existing already, and then you can stretch it down to its halfway. So if you click on that endpoint, you can basically snap it onto the midpoint, and immediately you have a 150 wall. So this now you can move, holding the snap on the midpoint of the bottom of that line, you can snap it on the middle of this object here, and then you can just draw a temporary line and stretch again until you meet that line. So basically, very quickly, you've done these two different walls. Now if you want to join these walls and make one continuous wall, if that is your thing and you want everything to be continuous, since you don't want to see this line, what you need to do is trim this wall. So instead of exploding it, meaning that we will explode the four-sided rectangle into 4 separate lines, we're going to use the trim command. So TR enter on the keyboard, and then you just select the object that you'll be trimming, and then just trim through by basically drawing a rectangle across that object. Just basically draw that hatch. Not really sure how to explain it, but you basically draw that crossing window over those lines that you want to trim. So if I just repeat that, basically you will be selecting both those objects. So TR enter, select both your objects, right click, and then just draw a crossing window over that little wall. And you'll see that you now have one object being this and a second object being that. If you want, you can go and fillet it or use the poly edit that I mentioned in the previous lessons to create one single object out of this. But I don't really need to do that right now. I'm not that fussy about having single polylines for everything. So that is basically the same process that you will use for all of these secondary walls. You have a door over here, so you can go and do the same thing where you leave a 900 millimeter gap, fill in the rest of your wall. It'll be 150 wide, and that is going to be the same thing, copy paste, copy paste. Now for the slab edges, what I'd like to do is I'd like to define the main slab edges that there will be for the lounge, the stairs, as well as the edge of the balcony. So I'm going to choose a different layer called slabs, but I'm not going to use the original green color since we're not cutting through the slabs. When we draw a section of this later on, we will be cutting through those slabs and they will be green, just like the green walls. But since we're not cutting through it, we can use a lighter color. So you can either use red or you can use gray. I'm going to use red for now, and if it is too dark when I print it out much later on, I can reduce that color down to gray to thin it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the easy line, the one that goes vertically down, and then I'm going to choose an angle for this diagonal. I don't know exactly what it is, but we're going to figure that out as we go along. So the edge of the room can either be exactly on this grid line or it can be slightly before or after. That we can figure out later. So I'm going to start by drawing a polyline, so PL, enter, and I'm going to just draw a vertical line that goes straight down till about here. Then instead of just randomly choosing an angle, what I'd like to do is I'd like to draw a single line and then rotate it. Now I have looked at the angle earlier, so I know that it is roughly 30 degrees. So I'm just going to type in 30 manually on the keyboard, and that is now going to be a rounded off angle. It's much better to first decide what your angle is going to be, try to get it more or less rounded off so that when you do rotate objects or you're rotating furniture or whatever it may be in AutoCAD or even 3D Max at the end, you have a nice round angle to work with. It just makes life a lot simpler. The next thing you want to do is you want to fillet these lines, so F enter, and you just select those two lines, and then your fillet will be created. So those two lines now become one long polyline. So the next thing you want to do is you want to offset your other major lines. So for example, here we can measure, going DI enter, we can measure what this distance is. It's about 3.8 meters. And here the distance is about 2.3. So first thing we can do the 3.8, we can actually do 4 meters and then see if we can reduce it later. So let's offset by 4 meters, since that will be a nice huge terrace, and that looks more or less okay. I'm going to now extend that line down to this center line, so EX enter, and select the line that you're going to be extending to, right click, and then just click on the line and it'll extend out to where you've selected. So here we want to trim this line, so we TR enter and select the wall, right click, and then left click to trim the line. So these are pretty much extending, trimming, stretching, all of that will be happening many times over as you continue with the rest of your drawing. So same thing pretty much just repeats until you finish. Here the wall needs to be slightly longer, so we're going to stretch that out, so S enter, and I'm just going to, holding down shift, going to select or deselect the objects that I don't want to be stretching. So then I'm going to hit F8 so that I don't have this radial manipulation. I can only now move it up and down. And I'm just going to stretch it out slightly past that line. And again, trim it down by that wall. So now what I need to do is I need to get this line in place. So I'm going to choose a nice round number again. So that is roughly going to be 2.5. So typing in 2.5 and offset again. Now this line will be the main one, and I can delete the one that was offset, and I'm just going to fillet this by hitting F enter and then selecting this line and then that one. So this is pretty much going to be happening again and again, and the same process just continues until you reach your pretty much the end of your drawing. And I'm going to do the rest of this off camera. I'm going to also do the pool. I'm going to do the pool edge. I'm going to do this line over here, which is the edge of a planter. There's going to be a palm tree of some kind planted here. And the same thing for your stairs. We can also then have a look in the next lesson how we start dealing with all of the columns and how we start dealing with the openings. So that is going to be the next level of detail. Just once these main slab edges are complete, we're going to do that next. So watch the next lesson. This one was mainly about secondary walls and about slab edges, trimming, filleting, and doing all the rest, getting all of the geometry to be nicely, neatly laid out.